ये अपना संजीवन है।
Hi friends, welcome to this episode of video lectures. We are understanding an autobiographical story which is penned down by famous Indian author Mr. Khushwant Singh. So in this episode, let's understand what happened further in the story, how the relationship with the grandmother took changes and differ, and as well as how the story concludes. So let's understand all these elements in this episode. As the years passed in the city, their interaction reduced. As the years rolled on, they were living in the city. The interaction, the relationship, so it started reducing. For some time, she continued to wake him up and would get him ready for school. When they shifted to city for initial some years, grandmother, she used to continue wake him up in the morning and would get him ready for the school. She would ask him what he had learned in the school that day. So when author used to return after school, after schooling, she used to ask him that what he used to learn and what teacher taught him. So every day after the school time, when author used to return, she used to inquire about his studies, about his learning. The scientific terminology and the English words made her unhappy. And in city, author was admitted in the English medium school, and so the scientific terminology and the English words, so with these new changes, she was not happy. She was totally unhappy with his education through English medium. As she didn't know the language, she could not help him with the lessons. So she was not an English medium student or learner, so she was away from the knowledge of the English language. So there was no any correlation in her life about the English words, about English language. So from her side, there wasn't any help in the learning of lessons to the author, and she didn't know even terminology, scientific words, English words. Even she was unaware of the English language. So it was totally impossible that she couldn't help him with his lessons in his study, in his learning, as his new school never taught him about God and religious scriptures. This made her sad. In the city, the school from the city of the city, it was not dealing any religious thoughts or religious scriptures, or not dealing anything about the God. So his new school never taught him the messages from the God, and even the religious messages. So such things were not there, and this made her very sad, and she was not happy with the proceedings, what type of syllabus was followed in the new school in the city. So she was totally nervous with his learning in the new school in the city, and she was not happy with the what type of the proceedings and syllabus was followed in his author's new school. She did not approve of such an education. So even she didn't approve of such as an education. To her, education should be based on the messages of the God and the religious scriptures and holy books. Holy lessons should be given more preference, but such things were not there by the school side in the city. So she did not approve of such as an education. To her, it was not an education. When she came to know that she was getting when he was getting music lessons, it disturbed her. And when she learned that music was taught in the school, and author was learning, getting music lessons. So she was disturbed much. She was totally unhappy, and she was very nervous. And the that that uh, according to grandmother, music was indecent, and it was an art of for the beggars and the prostitutes, and not for those belonging to decent families. So, for a grandmother, learning of music or the music lessons in the school, so it meant indecent, and it was an art for the beggars. So she was believing that music should not be taught. Music lessons should not be given to the students in the school. To her, it was an art for the beggars and prostitutes, and not for those belonging to decent families. And music should not be taught to the students who belong to the of a student of a noble birth, or a student of cultured families. They should not learn music. The students who belong to the decent families should not be taught music. So it was her belief, it was her opinion, and she was a lady of traditional thoughts. She had some ideology in her mind, which was best on the traditional ways of her life and culture. She didn't like that he learned music. Grandmother disliked, she did not like that author was learning music, so she stopped talking to him. And ultimately, she decided not to talk with the author, because she didn't like it that the author was learning music in the school, and even school was taking initiative to teach him, to give him, to get him the music lessons. So she was totally unhappy with these all these proceedings. So she decided to stop talking to him, and so there was no any much oral communication between them. After some years, as the author went to university, he had a room of his own. The common link of his friendship with his grandmother that they had when they shared the same room was a change now, and thus his friendship with grandmother ended. After some years, author took admission in the university, and in the home he was allotted a room of his own. He was given independent room, separate room for him. The common link of the friend of his friendship with his grandmother, so that they used to share the same room, so that was changed now, and thus his friendship with her ended. So that was the most heartbreaking one. That's the most tragic one. Their friendship now, it was ended, because both of them were not sharing the same room. He was a grown up, he was a student of university, and that's why he was a given, he was matured enough now, and he was given a separate room in his house. And so the common link that was cut down, and the relations were changed now, and the friendship with her, that was ended. She became more private and spent her whole day spinning wheel. Grandmother became more calm and quiet, and she was not talking much, and even not keeping any comfortable relations with the author, and she became more private and spent her whole day spinning wheel. So now she used to remain herself in an isolated way, and she used to pass her time by her own ways, and whole day she used to spin the wheel. From sunrise to sunset, she would sit and silently recite her prayers, and from morning to evening she would sit silently and maximum times she used to recite her prayers. In the afternoon, she used to feed sparrows in the veranda, and in the afternoon, after lunch, she used to sit in the veranda and she used to feed sparrows, offering okay grains to the chapatis to the sparrows. Breaking the bread into small pieces, she would feed hundreds of birds. In the city, see how try to understand how she used to feed sparrows. She used to break bread into small pieces, and she would feed hundreds of birds there in the veranda. She used to sit there in the veranda, and hundreds of birds, sparrows, used to come there, and the birds would gather around her. Some sat near her, some on her legs, some on her shoulders, and few on her head. Hundreds of sparrows used to gather there, and some used to sit around her, gather around her, near her, on her legs, on her shoulder, and few on her head too. She never shooed them, she never objected them, but always smiled. But she was accepting it in a positive way. She was not objecting sparrows to sit on her parts of her body. She was the happiest in that half an hour during the whole day. She used to remain very happy in that half an hour during the whole day. She used to feed the sparrows, and she used to pass a very good time, half an hour in the afternoon, in the company of hundreds of these sparrows. When the author decided to go abroad for further studies, he believed it would be the last time he would see her, as he would be gone for 5 long years. As they all reached the station, she held him tightly and kissed his forehead. He thought it was the last physical contact with her. The weight impression of her hand was dear to him. She was not sentimental at all. When he came back after 5 years, he came to meet him at the station. She came to meet him at the station. She looked just the way she did 5 years ago, not a day older. She held him again in her arms and was still reciting her prayers. He noticed on the first day of his arrival that only sparrows would make her happy. And after some years, author decided to go abroad for his higher studies. He believed that it would be the last time that he would see his grandmother, because he was moving for 5 years. And when his family reached to the station, she held him tightly and kissed his forehead. The author thought that it would be the last physical contact with her. He thought that she might die, she might take her last breath before his return from the abroad. Then it was the weight impression of her hand was dear to him. She was not too sentimental at all. And then after 5 years, when he returned from the abroad, again the family gathered at the station to welcome him, to receive him. Author okay understood, author felt that she looked just the way she did 5 years ago, not a day older. She held him again in her arm and was still reciting her prayers. One more thing he felt, he noticed on the first day of his arrival, that only sparrows would make her happy. So in the company of sparrows, hundreds of sparrows, and feeding them, so that duration of the day, it was the most happiest moment uh, to her. The day author had returned after 5 years from the abroad, it was the date on that day in the evening. Grandmother didn't follow her regular routine of praying, so that day she didn't offer any prayers, but instead she collected a few women from the neighborhood and got a drum and started singing with them. So it was very surprising. It was somewhat a different behavior from her side. She collected a few women from the neighborhood and again got a drum and started singing with them. She trumped the ruined part of the drum and sang along. And even she started singing with all those neighborhood women. The whole family persuaded her to stop as she might get ill due to exhaustion. His parents and even he also uh, tried to persuade him to stop as she might get ill due to the exhaustion. The next morning she fell ill, and the next morning, uh, as a result, she fell ill. It was a mild fever. The doctors told them that it would go away, but she took it differently. According to her, she would die soon as her end was near. And according to her, she was near to her end, and she would take her last breath. So she understood that death was lingering near her, coming closer to her. She started chanting prayers as she didn't want to waste her last hours in talking to anyone. So grandmother started offering prayers, chanting prayers, as she did not want to waste a single minute, her last hours, last moments in talking to anyone. So now she was moving, she was reaching towards the other end of her life. She was going to meet the end of her life, and so she accepted that her end was near, and she was going to meet death. The family members protested, tried to stop her, but she lay peacefully on her bed, chanting prayers and doing her bits. Suddenly, she stopped, and the rosary fell from her lifeless fingers. A calm, pale appearance spread on her face, and she was dead. Her soul was arrested in the peace. She was dead. She was passed away. The family lifted her from the bed, laid her on the ground, and wrapped her with a red colored cloth. Thousands of sparrows sat silently near her. The author's mother fetched some bread for the birds, but they didn't eat any. Not a single piece of a bread was taken by the sparrows, birds. They flew away later as the family carried the dead body. And thousands of sparrows they flew away later when the family carried her dead body. The sweeper removed the crumbs of the pieces of the breads the next morning. Not a single piece of bread was taken by any of the sparrow, a group of any member of a group. Okay, nothing. Not a single piece was taken away by the sparrow. The birds were so sensitive. They did not want to eat bread, but were mourning the death of the one who had fed them for many days. Even sparrows were mourning the death of author's grandmother, the one who had fed them for many years, for many days, with the pieces of bread. So, grandmother at last met her end, and even the sparrows were very sad, they were very unhappy. They gathered there and offered their respect, honor to the grandmother, and they didn't have any a piece of a bread which was offered by author's mother. And when her dead body was carried away by the family members, they flew away. They did not want to eat bread but were mourning the death of the one who had fed them for so many days. So this indicates that birds and animals, they too are very sensitive. Thank you very much for watching this video.